All right, guys. I do have a guest. It's not the guest I originally planned on. I was supposed to have Pete Stoneman from Stoneman and Sons, but he got busy. So I picked another guy from my kayak tournament trail, and actually the guy who is to blame for some financial distress on me because I ended up picking up a bunch of rods and signing on his pro staff. So I have my boy Chris down here.
Hey,
He is
everybody.
he. I actually officially unofficially met Chris in the beginning of the year because I met him at the FX booth at one of the trade shows. He probably doesn't even remember that, but we actually talked for a few minutes. I walked away, and then I saw him at the tournament. He looked familiar, and then we started talking about rods and everything. And from there, everything kind of blew up into now he can't get rid of me, and he hears from me probably daily on messages. So, but the one thing I wanted to bring up first, guys, is, and I actually wanted to ask Chris this because I actually never got this story, is how did you get hooked up with FX originally?
Yeah, so back when FX became a production rod, originally they were a true custom build that Bob was doing, the owner or one of the owners. They had a promotion on Facebook, actually, just like we all see. We all say, oh, those don't work. None of those are legit. They had a production. I was looking at moving to a good quality rod. I had some good quality rods, but I wanted to kind of be loyal to a brand. And what they had at the time was they had some unique things going. They had what was called a microwave guide, which had the first guide had an inner guide that was much smaller. It was designed to reduce the line slap on the rods, and that was pretty. I was interested in that. Also, they were veteran owned. I'm a veteran myself, so all of that kind of rolled into me on Facebook. What they had was buy two, get a discount, and then if you liked them, you could join the pro staff. And that's kind of how I did. I got really lucky. I didn't have a huge resume. I was fishing a local club up here in Vermont, which we don't have any big clubs. So the one I was in was a good club. I was doing well in the standings that year as a non-boater. So it just rolled. Being a veteran helped me greatly. And I just talked to one of the owners at the time, Brian, and we hit it off. Talked way longer than we should have, which probably will happen tonight also. Um,
Yep.
and then we just went from there. I loved the rods. I had a couple really good quality rods. I had a Shimano Zodius. For me at the time was an expensive quality rod. I had a couple of Wright McGill rods that I really loved. And I just took the FX rods. I matched rod for rod with my two favorites, one spinning, one baitcaster. I went with the medium heavy in the baitcaster. I went with the medium I went with the 7.4 medium in the spinning, and I matched them. And the FX rods were lighter. They felt more responsive. They also, to me, just felt better in my hand. And so I went with them, and then became part of the pro staff. And the first spring, so that was 7 years ago, I believe, 6 or 7 years ago. They were doing a show at one of the shows that you go to, that I've seen you at, the Boxborough show. At the time, it was Boxborough. Now it's Marlborough, I think.
Marlboro,
Uh,
yeah.
right? But at the time, it was Boxborough, and I just went and helped out in the booth. And then it just kind of organically worked out. The one of the other guys that I was doing that with, that was kind of running it at the time, got real busy with work and everything else. So I ended up taking over the running of it, and it's just been organically growing ever since.
I think so. My interest actually started long before I fished one, and it was having been to probably, I'm gonna say, three different trade shows that FX was at, and there was a theme, and it was every time I went to one of those trade shows, there was a dude carrying one or two FX rods. Like it was like literally a thing, and I'm not even trying to talk up the brand or anything. Like when I was at the Marlboro show this year, I was at A-Bay's booth, and I was hanging out selling baits and stuff, and people were walking into the booth to buy baits, and they had two rods in their hand. And then the next guy would walk in, and he'd have two rods in their hand. And I will say, and I usually don't even mention other brands, but FX wasn't it wasn't like F
No.
the only brand there. There was one directly across, and I'm not going to name names. I don't want to disparage anybody, but there was a pretty solid company straight across, and across the hall, Lou's was over there. So it wasn't like they were the only rod there. Like it was, and everybody had one, and I was curious about him at that point. And then honestly, it's his fault because he offered to let me demo one, and I fished it during a tournament. And as weird as this sounds, and this is something that I never thought I would say, the spinning rod is actually what won me over. And I hate spinning rods. I do not like fishing spinning rods, but I do now.
Yeah.
That angler series spinning rod, even in this now, don't get me wrong, I think the 7 foot would be better than the 6.6, but I bought the 6.6 specifically for skipping and being able to fish like under stuff. But
Yep.
that thing, I don't know, I told you, but dude, I fished Hortonia the other day, and I pulled a 5 pounder out of like heavy matted vegetation. Like
Yeah. You told
not
me
like
right away, actually.
and that was, dude, I was in shock because it had like that jig creak sound from the braid. Like you knew there was a lot of tension on that rod. You could hear that as I'm cutting pads
Right.
to bring that thing back with a spinning rod. And that's
Yeah, and you're
immediate.
only running the 6.6, so if you had the 7 footer or the 7.4, you're going to even have more leverage.
And the thing is, it never faltered. I never had an issue. I did not lose that fish. And that was literally 10-pound braid to a floral leader with a little wacky hook. So like it kept that wacky hook pinned in that fish's face while I was cutting pads, dragging that thing out. Like I don't know how to give a better testament to a rod than that, because I can tell you some of the other rods I have right here would have probably broke trying to do that.
Yeah, or
and I,
broke, or they would have been a little too soft, and you would have lost that fish.
yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
and that was the thing.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing is the combination of the backbone and the tip. Bob has designed every blank and all the lines all individually. It's not like, and some of them actually, I talked with Bob quite a bit. Some of them are kind of organic. Like he designed a rod, got it built, and then he's like, "Oh, if this rod was a little softer," so he would reach out to the master builder. Master builder would make it a little softer, and he's like, "Oh, now I've got the perfect rod for this or the perfect rod for that." We have one of my, I'm a big fan of longer rods, especially in the kayak. Now, the kayak world, everybody wants a short rod. That it might work for them. For me, I want to get leverage and get into that fish faster and be able to turn that fish and control it faster. So for me, a lot of my rods are longer. We have a 7.7 series in the baitcasters, and there's 4 rods in that model line. And it goes from a medium heavy to a heavy plus and to an extra heavy. It just really, you have those different actions to do what you need in the same length of a rod. And for me, the advantage of doing that is I have 3 or 4 of them almost every time in the kayak. And those are, I could pick up the same rod, have basically the same feel, but get the different action. One for a chatterbait, one for a frog, one for a weightless if I want. It's the same feel, but I have that different action for exactly what I'm trying to do.
The main reason, honestly, I signed up for pro staff and wanted to be part of the team was the price point and the variety. So like you look at some companies and they have one model, and they give you your medium fast, your medium moderate, your medium heavy fast, your medium heavy moderate. FX has a 6.6 medium, a 6.6 medium mod, a 7 foot medium, a seven. Like you have what you want, and the beauty of it is, and I've looked at a lot of companies, and I've done a lot of research because I've really started specializing and getting into rods for technique specific stuff. And the difference between, and that's one of the main reasons I signed up for FX, was they have $109 rod, and then $189 rod, and then the big boy rod. I think those are what, 300. I think
Three,
those are.
320 ish, I think.
But for me, as someone who I'm not going to rep a company that I don't feel like I can help sell. Like, I don't want to just sign up for a discount. I want to be part of the company and help the company grow. And I'll be honest, and I'll tell you right now, the guys in the chat right now will confirm it. They're not buying $300 rods tomorrow.
Right.
It's just not my audience is not buying $300 rods because I'm not even buying $300 rods.
Right.
But
Neither
my
am I.
audience will buy a $109 rod, $189 rod. To be honest, there's a lot of rods at your local retail store that, in my opinion, that I have bought that aren't as good as the $189 FX.
Oh,
I've
absolutely.
replaced 3 of those rods that actually there were 2 of the rods I actually swapped out to make room for the FX rods cost more than the FX rods.
Yep.
So, I mean, and that's the thing. The other thing I noticed about them too is like just the having the conversation with everyone. Like, it's not they're not like, how do I word this? Obviously, it's a business. They want to
Right.
make money, but that's not their push for their staff. They're not like, oh, you need to sell X number of rods per year, and you need to push this model. It's the literally the conversation that was had with me was, you need to fish and talk about what you like about the rods.
Yep.
That was my mandate, and that's what really turned me on to it. Is it's not meant to be a production company in the sense of, we need to sell 20,000 rods this year, so you need to fluff up this particular model. It's
Right.
just use it and talk about it. And that's what was cool to me, is that it's about the angler. The mentality is about what can we make to help people catch fish. And like you were hinting on, I personally like shorter rods because jerkbait, topwater frogging, it's hard to do
Yep.
those motions with a 7'6" rod. Now, granted, it is nice to have the 7'4" rod to do that top water frogging when they get in the grass, because it is a little harder to get it out. But
Right.
you like a jerk bait with a 6'6", you can like work a jerk bait like you would normally work a jerk bait in a boat. Whereas in a kayak with a 7-foot rod, you're slapping the tip on the lake every time you're trying to work that bait. And that's what's
Yeah,
nice.
and you mentioned the jerk bait and that 6'6". Originally, our number one jerk bait rod is a 6'9", medium extra fast. A lot of people hear that extra fast. The reason it's an extra fast is you can control everything about your bait with that extra fast tip, and yet it still has a soft enough tip. Even though it's weird to say that, because the extra fast will be the tip, but it's still soft enough that you're not ripping the hooks. But that new 6'6" with the medium, that rod really is designed, in my opinion, for the kayak, for the shorter person, or for the kayak fisherman. And I have both. And the 6'9", especially with a bigger jerk bait or the big triple hook spooks, that's
Yeah.
my go-to. But on the smaller, the 90 series, whether it's a 2-hook spook or the smaller jerk baits, or when I know that I'm going to be throwing a jerkbait a lot in the kayak, I run the 6'6" because of the rod slap and a little less fatigue.
Lighter.
And you talked about how you see two rods running around the show all the time. Of course, at the shows we do discounts, deals. We're always good about that. But that 6'6" is how I sell a lot of rods. I hand them that. I hand them that with a lightweight, a really lightweight reel. And when I hand somebody that, the first thing they say is, "Oh my God." They literally say, "Oh my God." They put it in their hand and they can't believe how light it is. And then, we show them that how quick it is, the responsiveness and the sensitivity of it, and it's sold. It sold itself. And the same thing, spinning rods. Number one technique is either a net or a drop shot, or sometimes a hair jig type finesse stuff. I hand them either, depending on what they're talking about. If they're talking about the drop shot, I hand them the 7.4 medium. If they're talking about the net, I hand them the 7.4 medium light. And I hand them that with a very lightweight spinning reel. And again, they just can't believe what they have in their hand. And I tell them it's a 7.4, and they're like, "No way." And then
Yep.
they feel it, and they're just amazed at the weight and the sensitivity of it.
I think honestly, to be completely honest, the selling point for me though, and that's what I've been trying to do, is I've been doing the same thing you do. Like, if somebody comes with me, I'm like, "Here, cast this," because you don't like. It's hard to really tell. Yeah, it's light, but I mean, light is light. But what's different is like even with the spinning rod. with a wacky rig. Like I can tell with my FX rod if that's a bluegill. Like you can tell the difference between the nipping bite of a bluegill versus the suck in of a bass.
Yep.
Like I can tell if it's I could tell it was a rock bass before I brought it to the boat.
Especially rock bass.
You know what I mean? Because it's just the way they bite. But like that wasn't something I could feel before. And I've done a little bit of research, and a lot of it does have to do with the fact that the blank goes down into the handle seat, so you can feel
Correct.
it there. When you feel that blank there, with the way I hold a spinning rod, like with my thumb right there, my thumb's on the blank. So when
Blank.
they hit that blank, I'm feeling it in my thumb.
Yep.
A lot of companies stop that blank before the reel seat, so you lose that sensitivity in that plastic reel seat.
Yep. It's that. It's things like all the components are direct to the blank. A lot of companies put tapes or fillers, and that affects that vibration, that sensitivity. Another thing is paint. Sounds funny, but the paint on the rod, more weight, right? So if I have a white rod or a bright green rod or a red rod, there's extra paint to get to that level. And that all adds more weight, but also takes away from the feel. Anything on that blank, the cork. So in our rods, you can either have a wind grip, which is made for FX. It's not a knockoff. It's a straight wind grip that you get from the Wind Putter Company. You know, the one of the times when the shipping started happening with COVID and all that, Bob couldn't get him. He have to make a special. They had to change all their tooling at the factory to get all of our blanks. So he ordered a huge amount just for FX. And they all say FX on them. But those are right to the blank. There's no extra fillers in there. And that all makes such a difference in that sensitivity. And it's hard to push that selling point in real life. Castability, another thing, as you probably noticed, you're casting further with the exact
Right.
same reel and the exact
That
same action
moderate.
rod, but you're casting further now.
So
That's because of the
that casting moderate rod that I bought. So that thing, you take a 1.5 square bill with fluoro, and I'm throwing that 10, 15 yards further. And that's
absolutely.
a freaking potato chip of a fucking crankbait. Like it's
Yep.
this big. And because of the way that action is and the whip and this how it casts, and I'm not talking like high end Shimano Corrado reel. I'm using a Daiwa CC80. It's a
Right.
$50 reel. It's not,
Right.
we're not talking, matter of fact, on my medium heavy fast, I'm using a freaking Cast King Spartacus casting reel. It's $35 on Amazon. And I'm casting further with that than I can any of my other rods.
Yep.
And that's the crazy thing about it. So I don't want to necessarily talk rods the whole time. I do want to
That's
get
fine.
some fishing talking.
Yeah.
So
Let's go.
for those of you who don't know, this is an interesting live stream because we are about to compete against each other come Sunday. And I think you guys are 6 inches ahead of us in a
Yeah. Something in that
electric.
range.
So these guys, so it's literally number one and number two in our tournament trail. And are you doing any other tournaments, or is it just Slay Nation this year?
Just this. I've done others in the past. I used to do a lot of, not a lot, but some boating. And really, the reason I've been trying in Vermont to get something going where we can fish, but it's, as you know now, it's Vermont. You have to pay just to launch as a tournament. And it's hard because most of us kayak fishermen are low budget. We're dropping, like you said, it's hard to sell a $189 rod. That's why the sales matter and the shows matter. But it's also hard to go and drop $50 to do a tournament or $100 to do a tournament and win $100 if you win it. It doesn't make sense. So it's been very hard. And
I had to explain that. So I work in an office, right? So I work with software developers, high level nerds, and customer support people. So most of the people I work with have never gone fishing, or their knowledge of fishing is bob or worm, and that's as far as they ever went,
right.
right? So they're like, well, how much did you win? And I'm like, I took second. And they're like, how much did you win? And I'm like, $120. And they're like, "Oh, that's good." And I'm like, "Yeah, but if you take into consideration that it cost me $50 in gas to get there and the $55 entry fee, I made $10."
Right. And by the
Like,
way, how many
you
times did
know,
you pre-fish?
oh, that body of water. So the one we took second on, I actually sucked at. That one I won. That
That's
I was
close.
there. I was there freaking last weekend. But
Right.
and that's the
But
thing. Like
the one coming up,
miles.
the one coming up, we've both been up there. You've been up 3 or 2.
This is
Yeah.
two.
And
I've
we've
only
been
took
up
two
twice.
times.
Yeah. We've been up twice. And I mean, this last time we went up with the kayak. So I had the trailer and I mean, that's a tank of gas, you know? You
Dude.
know?
It's 2 hours and 45 minutes,
Yeah.
and
So
I'm not
we're,
going to be able to go up the night before anymore.
oh yeah, neither are we. Well, we could, but Nick has his children, so we're gonna stay and drive up. So we're leaving the house at 3 a.m. And like I said, we've been up twice and left at 3:30 or 4 both times, and full tank
Yeah,
of gas. And
you literally win to break even if you're lucky, and
if
that's
you're
if you're not
lucky,
even
yeah,
signed up.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the
So
thing is
Nick
the
and I
money
have
isn't really about the
we've
money.
done it where the gas is not. We're not putting that in the equation right now, knowing that it's kind of a first year thing. But so we're just like happy to, in theory, our tournaments are paid for now. But like you said, the gas, and the food, right? We were Sunday, we were up there and we left up there around, we kind of fished it like the tournament. We were on the water a little earlier, but we got off the water right at, tournament ending time. And you eat and drink out on the water, which I know some of us do and some of us don't. But then we had to eat dinner on the way home. That all adds up.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Like, see, I was doing MAKB last year, and every
Right.
tournament was like 3 hours away. So I'm kind of more attuned for doing that. But my plan was originally to go up and stay. I was actually going to stay at Kent's house. I decided I was going to stay with him instead because we were going to fish Elmore on Saturday,
Oh, that
basically
would have been
practice for
nice.
the next event. And then he lives right next to Elmore. So then we were going to hang out at his house. But I've got the 2-year-old puppy that's starting to not be very happy about us leaving.
Oh,
And she has bad anxiety to the point where she actually ripped the door frame all the way down to the frame. So I don't want to leave her for 12 hours by herself in
I
the
don't blame you.
house. So I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm actually getting up early Saturday morning. Because I don't know if you do actually, this is a good question to ask for a tournament. What I do is I literally tie all my first planned baits the night before. That's all
Everything.
tied on my rods before I leave the house.
Yep.
I
We'll do it
retie
Friday. We'll do
leaders, I
this one
retie
Friday night.
hooks.
We already have it planned out.
Yeah.
All
And
new
it's tied.
braid the leader line, all new knots, all
Yeah.
baits, all new knots. This tournament, I mean, not to give away too much, but going to be a limited number of baits. I'm still going to have a lot of rods on the deck, but
Yep.
it's going to be a
Yep.
limited number of baits. We have a plan. We've caught some really good fish there, which, but then the last trip wasn't as good. We still got decent fish, but it's going to be a weird one. I don't know that there's a lot of good measurable fish for all of our teams to be able to catch what we would hope. 5 fish, 16 to 18 inches would be a decent showing.
Yeah.
There are bigger fish in there. We've proven that, but I don't know that there's enough fish in that range for all of us to catch 5. I don't think there is.
The problem is, and I think that's going to be the biggest issue, is there's a term that a lot of people don't understand, and the more you do tournaments, the more you understand it, is it fishes small.
Correct.
It doesn't matter how many acres the lake is. It's basically two, I'm going to say 150-yard stretches.
Yep. I would agree with
In
you.
my
There's two
experience,
and
there's
yep. Nope.
basically two stretches that are about 150 yards long that we're going to be fucking merry-go-rounding all day.
Yep.
I
Yep. There's
guarantee you're going to see my FX jersey and his FX jersey in the same scene quite a bit throughout the day because
I hope so.
there's just very limited area, and the middle is 50 feet deep, and that's not my game.
Right.
I'm not going and drop shotting in 40 feet of water. I'm just not doing it. I
I'm
don't
running
have
low
the
on battery.
patience for that shit. But no, I agree with you. So what I do, and I'm gonna be again, without giving my competitor any information, but he's got the same kind of mentality as I do. A couple of my rods are going to have the same bait on it, just so I don't have to retie it if I get it hung up. I've
Right.
done that a lot. Like, I'll do that with spinning rods where I'll actually have two of the exact same finesse bait on my spinning rods, so that if I shred a leader or I catch a pickerel or something, or I get it hung up in a rock, I can just switch rods and not have to worry about retying while I'm trying to get back on the fish. And that's something that, like you said, it's going to be. I'm rocking 9 rods, but realistically, I'm fishing 4 techniques. I
Yep.
think, if that. It's just a lot of different variations on the same thing because I did not find what I want. And that's the thing is, this event, if you guys want to watch any of my tournament videos this year, this is going to be the one to watch because we've got Brian that's going to be, with a good finish, can change the leaderboard. If you guys run away with it, I'm going to have a hard time catching you rest of the season. And I think you're going to find that it's going to come down to one good fish or 2 good. Like, it's going to come down to the guy who gets that one good kicker, or there's going to be guys, I really think, it's not trying to like disparage the team, but there's going to be teams that don't catch 5. I have a feeling, and it's going to be a lot of, because like I said, it's 2 stretches of water. And if you come in right behind someone who's already fished it, those fish are going to be, they seem spookier there.
They are.
Like, I've noticed that, like, they're there and then they're gone. Like, they're not resident fish. I think the fish that you're catching there, I think, live deep, go shallow to eat, and then head back out deep. And again,
Yeah, because
I'm not a
we've
big
actually caught fish in the same area and they're not the same fish. And I
No,
know
yeah,
for a
yep,
fact, like our cast is almost identical and they're
yep,
not the same fish.
yep. Well, the one I posted in the group chat, I mean, you'd know if it was that fish because that fish was mangled.
Yep.
Like, and it's only been a few weeks, so that fish has all kinds of scars and wounds. Like, you just would know if you caught that fish again.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to take a look because we have one similar measurement. But I don't remember the scars. So I don't think it's the same fish,
And,
but
and some of these were fresh, and some of them were definitely not. Like, you could tell, like, his jaw had a malformation in it. Like, he had, and that's something that drives me nuts. And if you guys do that, I will punch you in the face at the boat ramp. These guys that hold a fucking bass like this and break their jaw to hold up, put your freaking hand up there.
right.
Because I've caught so many fish this year like that had a freaking dislocated jaw where you can tell somebody held the fish horizontally from the jaw.
Yeah.
Like, stop doing that crap.
Yeah. You could do that with a half a pounder,
Yeah,
but
you want to do
anything
that
over.
with the bluegill? I don't
Right.
care. Stop doing
Or
that
a
with the
perch.
4-pound bass. Yeah, stop doing it with the freaking bass, man.
Right.
It's killing me. So, one question, Scott, and this is something that actually I was curious about too, is he was looking for a heavy action for like frogging. Which rod in the FX series would you recommend for that?
Yep. So it depends what kind of a frog you're throwing. If you're throwing a twitching frog and you like a longer rod, the 7.4 Heavy Plus is the perfect rod. I know people that swear by that rod for frogging. If you're throwing more of a moving and you like a little bit longer, the 7.7 Heavy Plus is my go-to. But when I do throw more of a popping or a real slow where I tip down, less vegetation. For me, when I'm throwing a frog in real heavy stuff, my tip is up. A lot of people don't fish it that way. That's why I like the 7.7. I get into the fish quicker. I keep them up, hopefully up out of the crap, like you said, cutting pads.
Yep.
I don't like to have to do that because you and I both know if they get around 3 or 4 of them, you're not cutting it and they're coming off. You get it hooked. You're like, I know that's a fish. You get in there and he's gone, So those 2 rods. Now, if people like a really short rod, we have a 7.10 heavy. It's a good rod for throwing a frog tip down. And in a kayak, that might be the one you would use. I don't use that rod for that. I don't want to say I don't like that rod. It's just the way I throw a frog. I like the longer rod.
Well, and that's the thing too, is if you're throwing like a hollow belly frog, frog, that longer rod gives you that distance too. People don't realize that like a 7 foot heavy rod is not going to get that frog as far as a 7.9 or 7.6
yeah.
even. It's a
My
whole
7.7.
different.
Yeah, I could throw a frog further than 90% of the people I fish with. And I've
Yep.
been in the back of a boat and thrown a frog further than the guy in the front of a boat, and that's a 21-foot boat. And they turn around and look at me like, how are you doing that? And it's the rod. People don't realize the rod matters for casting and
Oh,
for the
real.
retrieving the fish, getting the fish out of the cover or not ripping the treble hooks out where your moderate rod that you bought, that's where that
Yep.
comes into play. Um, it really does matter. Now, can you catch a 5 pound bass on a swimming pool? Absolutely, all day.
Yep.
But you have a better chance of casting to where you want, more accurate casting, the shorter the rod, the longer casting, the longer the rod. There are so many things. And as you know, I can talk all day about it.
So, and that's something that we will definitely go over. I'm actually going to be doing some more in-depth videos, and that's one thing that we're actually, my goal is to try to connect with him on a body of water that we're not competing against each other on, so we can actually share information and kind of go over, because there's nuances to it too. Like, I will tell you that if I'm using like a spook or a Chapo, Whopper Plopper, whatever you want to call it, I actually like a moderate rod for that,
Yep.
because what happens is I swing too early. When I see that blow up, my instinct is to instantly hook set. And if I'm using an extra fast or even a fast, I'm ripping the bait away from the fish. That moderate builds in a lag time for me, where when I'm sweeping, because of the time it takes that moderate to load up, I'm building in that 1-2 second that everybody's taught to wait on the top water. I'll do the same thing if I'm not fishing heavy grass. Like if I'm just going over the top of pads that don't have like grass below it, kind of
Yep.
like actually how Miles is built. Like there's a lot of those pads where there's not like grass below it, so it's just it falls through. Then I'll use a moderate. If I'm using fishing like heavy grass, then I go to the regular fast, because the one thing the moderate will do is screw you if they do get wrapped up in those pads, because you
Right.
can't get enough on it to drag them out, and you
Yep.
end up having to either go in for them or work it to get it out of there.
Yeah, and the 7.4 and the 7.7 and that heavy plus are a moderate. Now, again, they're a heavy plus, so they they're a moderate tip, but they get into the backbone because of the heavy plus. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the unique thing. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a couple other companies that have a whole lot more. You have to read a book to understand their actions, because they're not as
And
simple
that's
as
the thing. There's
ours.
no industry standard either. There is a
Right.
moderate is not a moderate. It depends on. I will tell you the best way I can describe FX is, and being new to it, is they are softer in the tip than you would expect them to be, but they load the same speed as what you would. It's really hard to explain, but like you can feel a bite on a rod that you wouldn't think you would feel the bite on, but then when you do the load, it does load like it's supposed to. And for those of you who don't understand, what we're talking about with action is a moderate rod is going to bend more than a fast action rod. And that's a really simplified explanation, and it's not even really that accurate. But the reason why they say fast is how long it takes to go from straight to fully loaded. And then moderate fast is a little bit slower. And then when you got other 100 different variations of that, but essentially it's how long does it take to go from straight to fully bent is really what we're talking about.
Yep. And that's another thing Bob did with the rods, not to stay on the rod thing that long, but he has a number of grams it takes to break the tip, meaning not break it like snap it, but turn the tip down.
Yep.
I think it's 18 inches, and he does it in grams. So you could take and look at the same length rod, and you can see the difference there. And that's just another very unique thing about Bob and the way he has designed these rods. It's not just, oh, this looks good and that looks good. He went to every blank, he flexed them, he bent them, he played with them, he worked with them, tweaked them. Then he would reach back out, hey, change this to give me that. do this, do that. They came back. He would do the same thing over and over and over again until he found the right rod. And now that he's done it so much, we really have and that's why there are a lot more models now than there were originally, because he's found these little tweaks that make the same or similar blank work better by just changing one little thing.
One little thing, yeah. So this is a person you know very well, BTM Fishing, is boy in our tournament trail. He's looking for best rod for hover, strolling, and jig head minnows.
Yeah, so if you're running anything below 1/4 ounce, I run our 7.4 medium light. And that is a technique that I have been doing long before people talk, well, long before I heard of anybody talking about it. It's a technique that I use for pan fishing. My dad loves to pan fish. So our 7.4 medium light is a phenomenal rod for that. And it's also my hair jig rod. It's also my Ned rod. The main reason why I like that rod for that, I can cast a lot further than most people would think, with even down to 32 ounce jig heads. Yep. Second reason is when I set the hook on those lighter wire hooks, the medium light action will keep the fish pinned, even if it's only skin hooked, especially in smallmouth, but it also will not straighten that hook. Now, can you straighten the hook? Yeah, I run normally 10-pound braid and anywhere between 8 and 12-pound floral leader. If you just pull nice and slow, not with the rod, but with the line, you can straighten that hook still. But with that rod, you won't straighten that hook. You get more life out of them. There are certain hooks on the market that if you use the wrong rod, your first fish, you're going to straighten that hook out with a 10-pound test.
Like mosquito light hooks and drop shot hooks.
Yep.
It's real, especially if you get a big largemouth.
Yeah.
You get them in the roof of the mouth.
Or I mean, you catch a 20-inch smallie, and that hook is going to come back straight.
That's the thing about the smallmouth too. So it's funny because a largemouth. Actually, me and Bear were talking about that. Is it's funny how largemouth use their body mass to fight.
Correct.
They kind of roll and they use their dead weight to pull down on you, whereas smallmouth use their agility. And that's almost more dangerous with those light hooks because they're changing direction quickly. So you have to be able, and that's where that lighter rod, the bend in that rod allows you to do that. You get that time. And that's actually why I wanted a moderate rod for square bills, because I have a problem with when I hook a square bill, for some reason, I don't know what it is, but every fish I hook with a freaking treble hook bait jumps. It's just a thing. It
pisses them off
straight up. And it's like and we're talking largemouth or smallmouth, and having that extra bend gives you the chance to tip your rod to prepare for a jump or follow that fish to adjust the direction changes. Whereas with a fast action rod, you dip a little bit and that rod's now straight. So that extra little bend and like when I go to net them, that's what burns me the most with treble hooks is I'll get my net ready. I'll get that fish close. But for some reason, when I go down to my net, my freaking rod hand follows my net and it straightens out that fast action rod. Whereas that moderate gives me that little bit more leniency to get down there to get that fish in the net. And that's
exactly. And you're saying that exactly right. It gives you, it's almost like you were talking about the delay with the hook set. It gives you that little bit longer to correct what that fish did to you. Now you can adjust your angle, and that tip never slacked. It never went straight. And that's the difference with the Ned. That's why I like the medium light, is because with the Neds, more times than not, they're skin hooked. As soon as you put them in the net, the hook pops out because it wasn't buried. Not saying you can't bury them, but it's not always buried because the way smallmouths normally, they're a more aggressive fish when they hit that Ned. And so you set that hook a little quicker. A largemouth, he's going to suck it in and start swimming with it before you really feel him. Now, again, if I had that medium action instead of the medium light, I'm going to feel him suck it in a little better than with the medium light. But again, that's all just learning. It's all a big learning curve, and we all learn differently. But that's where that comes into play. And BTM and I have talked about a drop shot rod for him. The medium action, even though the hooks are very similar, the medium action on the drop shot to me is better because you're feeling the weight, then you get the bite. And when you set that hook, you need to bury that hook quicker. With the Ned, you feel it right away. If you set it too quick, you're yanking it out of their mouth. So again, it's just a play on, and everybody, it's all a personal thing. I know guys that like the 6.6 medium action for their drop shot because they fish more vertically, but for me, the 7.4, because if I'm in a boat, even when I'm in my own boat, it's one thing, but when I'm in a tournament, I'm always in the back. So that 7.4 gives me a longer cast. It gives me a little better feel. But the 6.6, if you're on the bow, dropping straight down, some guys like that for that. So that's why we have so many different rods.
This one's the last one I'm going to do. Well, I mean, I guess we'll take more questions on rods, but this one right here, I've always wondered what makes a rod a chatterbait rod versus just a reaction, like a swim jig rod.
Yeah.
Is there a
So
difference in the action?
again, the biggest thing, and a swim jig rod and a chatterbait rod can be very similar. Certain people will fish the same rod. The chatterbait is moving, single hook still, so you don't really need the moderate, but a lot of guys like the moderate because that chatterbait's moving, as you know. That moderate action gives you that time to load into the rod. It's also how you set the hook. So a lot of chatterbait rods have more of a moderate action. If you are that snap right away on the chatterbait bite, you will want that moderate action because you want that delay you talked about. For me, not to say I don't like a little bit of a moderate, but that's why I use either unless I'm using a chatterbait around laydowns or docks, small short casts, I'll run a shorter rod. But when I'm throwing my chatterbait into open grass fields, on the edge of lily pads, on the edge of what I call um, I call them like toolies or the little pencil reeds, whatever you want to call them, on the edge of that stuff, I'll use the longer rod because A, I could cast further, but B, I could get into the fish and turn that fish a little bit quicker with that longer rod. I get that hook sweep. When I set the hook, I'm sweeping that rod, and then I get more control, more leverage. The shorter rod around that stuff works also, but I have to be much quicker with it.
See, my problem is it's funny because I said that I'm actually contradictory. So when I fish a chatterbait in a swim jig, I can't use the moderate rod.
Right.
For some reason, I have it enough dialed in my head, and I think a lot of it comes to the fact that I've been cheap my whole life when it comes to fishing rods. So I think every rod I own is a medium heavy fast, except for a couple mediums up until I bought FX stuff. So I had a couple of moderate rods that were, we'll call it kind of moderate, more mod fast than moderate, right? And I noticed when I used that moderate FX rod with the swim jig, I was losing fish because I home run hook set. I like football jig hook set with my chatterbait, even when I'm reeling it. And when you do that with the moderate rod, it doesn't have the same emphasis that a fast action does.
Yeah, you're not burying the hook as quick.
It gets in here instead of back here.
Yep.
Or it doesn't get in the roof of their mouth, it gets into the front of their lip because I'm really giving it and I'm taking too long and that bait's getting out of their face before it gets in. So I've had to I actually use the medium heavy fast for that now because of that. And that's why I bought that rod, was for that reason. But it's crazy how like that's one thing that I've learned from doing tournaments and getting on like kind of getting off of rods. But that's why I got into specialized rods, is because I don't do tournaments to do money. If you do tournaments, if you do local grass or kayaks trails to win money, you're kidding yourself. You're losing money. Because I just had, I mean, literally probably $75 worth of tackle warehouse order show up that I'm going to use, that I bought specifically for the next event. Like, you end up buying baits, you end up customizing stuff, you end up tweaking stuff. What I got into tournaments for is I want to see how I measure up against other people. I want to see if I actually am as good as I think I am, or am I just good at my home lake because I have 150 hours this year on that lake? Because
and that's what's exciting about
on their home lake.
that's what's exciting about this trail for us. These are lakes we've never fished. I mean, Shelburne Pond was one we fished, but normally when I go to Shelburne Pond, when I was a kid, we'd go there to catch smallmouth. You can't find a smallmouth in there anymore.
No.
Now when I go there to catch crappie for my dad, and that's what we go there for. So Shelburne Pond, I knew, but even as you know, Shelburne Pond we caught it at the end of the spawn. Some fish were still kind of lingering.
Dude, that was a weird event.
It was a very weird event. And you were just talking about chatterbait. Nick lost 2 in a row on a chatterbait because he was using Nick uses all spinning rods, kind of like your partner.
It's impressive. It's impressive.
Yeah. But he lost both of them because he was using the medium instead of the medium heavy. So he wasn't getting the hook penetration that he would have if he had the medium heavy.
Yep. And that's what's crazy about, like, I think that's the biggest thing. If you can get into any grassroots tournament trail, do it for a couple of events, because what you learn, it's not even about competition. If you take the other people out of the equation and you go to a body of water that you're not familiar with and you have to figure out how to catch fish there, it adds techniques that I learned a jerkbait because of tournament fishing. I learned the Ned rig because of tournament fishing. There's a lot of techniques that I just didn't do because the home lake, I mean, you fish Tortonia. You're going to use a Ned rig there? Why?
Nope.
There's nowhere to put it.
We tried. So that I'll be honest with you, you know, that lake, Nick and I, every lake we've had a plan. We have a set number of where, and you can ask, I don't know if Brian's on, but we told Brian every lake what length is going to be needed to have a chance. Yep. And if you catch this, you have a chance to win. And that lake fooled me. It was much greater, but you knew it better than I expected. We did better than I thought we would do there. But when we first went there and I did map study, I'm like, I am going to kill this lake out deep with a Ned. And we went to the other side of the lake, and we went over there and we fished hard that whole other side of the lake. And we caught a few small largemouth, and that's all we got. The only good quality, the only good area where I could reproduce and catch a number of fish, and it was all over where you guys were. And we got lucky. We went even in the tournament. Nick and I ran. We're running kayaks that we can run 4.5 miles an hour pretty steady, so we can get away from the crowd faster than most. And we went over to that other side to try to, and we couldn't even reproduce what we had done when we free fished. We went back to our Pete was just like, man, we saw you there when you started. We saw you come back and fish it. Yep. But that was the only area that I had confidence that we could reproduce the bite and generate enough bites to hopefully catch enough fish. And you know that lake, and you stayed in your little area. And luckily, we went back and upgraded right at the end of the tournament on one of those little holes that's in there that I had seen a few fish in when we pre-fished, but nothing big. And I just stumbled across one. I saw him move as I was going by, and my partner was leaving me, and I had to yell at him like, hey, get back over here. You know, we got a chance to upgrade, you know, and it took him a while to understand what I was doing because I didn't want to yell and have everybody like come over and look what we were doing, you know, because we were all right at the end. We were all there in shouting distance.
Matt gets so excited when he catches a fish, and I'm like, dude, you gotta, like, especially there. So the funny part about that place, and I'll admit that it's really weird to say this, but we won. Okay. So we won. Yes, that's cool. I didn't really take any ego from that. I didn't take any confidence from that because I have thousands of hours on that body of water. I know that body of water to the point where if I fish it for 3 hours, I can tell you whether they're going to bite or not, where they're going to be, what baits they're going to hit. And if they're not hitting those baits, they're not hitting anything. Like, it's one of those places. And I said to him when we practiced it the week before, and I said, here's what's going to happen. Everybody is going to run to the island. They're going to run and fish around the island. They're going to run to the shoreline with the docks, and then they're going to go around the point because that's what the textbook says to do.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, what's funny about this place is we're not going to do that. and we're going to pretend like I forgot something, and we're going to wait, and we're going to delay and let them all fly out there, and then we're going to sneak in and fish our area. And that's what we did. And we actually didn't get on big fish right off. But the other advantage I have is where I caught fish. When you guys came in at the end, when we were all kind of fishing that one area,
Yep.
where I was is the edge of where the pads are now.
Right.
People
Yeah.
don't
Right
know
now it's
that
probably growing
because
up, right?
at that time it's all open water. But because I fished there so much, I know where the grass edge is 2 months from now. So I know where those fish actually are. Because if you actually fished the pad edge that was actually there, you were fishing 40 yards further down. But down there is like 6 inches of water. So I knew
Right.
that place really, really well. And that's actually the biggest thing that I can tell you. If you're learning how to break down a body of water, a lot of people think learning how to fish a body of water is figuring out what baits to use. That's actually not true. Figuring out a body of water is actually more removing water than it is
Correct.
figuring out a bait. It is figuring out where the fish aren't, not where the fish are. Because like this tournament that we're about to do on Sunday, it's not about what bait I'm going to use. Because the fact is we have, I think, 8 teams. And most of us are running a teammate, except for maybe Brad, and I think Brian might have his teammate. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I
But
don't
at the
know if
end of the
Dusty's
day,
fishing or not.
we've got 16 rods that are throwing baits on 250-yard stretches. And I guarantee you, me and Chris are probably going to end up throwing the same colored Senko at some point. We're going to end up throwing the same colored Ned rig at some point. It's going to happen. So you have to have that bait that's in the right spot. It's not even necessarily color. I'll tell you right now, a lot of times, I don't think color matters at all.
No, a
I
lot of
think
times it
where you
doesn't.
put it, the cat, and sometimes it's as stupid as, and I learned this from the salmon fishing world because I grew up doing king salmon fishing on Lake Ontario. Sometimes if you cast at a pad straight to it from the shore, you're not going to catch a fish. But if you step 3 feet to the right and cast to that same pad at a 45-degree angle, you'll get a fish. It's the same thing with a dock. And this is the dumb thing, and this is why this sport is so addicting, is some days the bass are only on the third post back in a dock. They're
Right.
not at the first post. They're not in the middle post. They're not at the shoreline. They're 3 posts in on the left side. Why? I have no idea. But for some reason, that happens. You go to the next dock, cast 3 posts in, there's a fish there. And the thing is, when you do a tournament, Chris may be casting to the front post, and Brad may be casting to the back post. And then I come right behind him and cast to the third post, and there's a 20-incher. It is so stupid how sometimes you can cast the same bait 6 times under a tree and get no bites. And the 7th time, you pull a 5-pound fish out of there.
Right.
And that's how this tournament, I think, is going to go. I think you're going to find that you're going to get guys that are almost ready to fist fight because they're going to go by a tree, they're going to fish it, they're going to leave. The next guy's going to come in behind him and start cheering because he caught a fish after you just worked it for 45 minutes. Like it's just how and that's actually what's cool about tournament fishing is there is that luck element. But there's also I have an area. I literally draw. So when I do all the scouting because it takes like
Right.
it's 3 hours away, and Matt doesn't have the opportunity to drive. Right. So ultimately, I will draw him a Google map. Like I circle. I'm like the green circle is where we're going to start. The yellow circle is where we're going to move to. The pink is we might, but we're probably not. And like I draw it all out, and then I have a plan. Now I will tell you the biggest mistake that people make when they tournament fish is they have a plan because guess what? 20 minutes into that day, that plan can be shredded.
Right.
At the end of the day, you have to be adaptive to the conditions and you have to be adaptive to the environment because, yeah, your plan may have been, oh, I'm going to fish this stretch of docks. Well, guess what? The guys with the motors got to the docks before you did. So you're not fishing those docks anymore. Or if you are, you're coming in behind them. And if you were planning on throwing a black blue flex Senko, guess what? There's a good chance the guy in front of you is throwing a freaking black blue flex Senko and already fished that area. So the fish have already seen what you're throwing. Now, that being said, that Chitin and Res tournament, dude, the only reason we got second was because we went to one shoreline. I fished the shit out of this grass edge and gave up, and Matt pulled 2 fish out of it. I
Yeah.
don't know how. I fished the crap out of that spot, and he managed to pull 2 fish out of the ether. So it's all kind of luck, but that's the biggest thing when you're fishing a new body of water, especially when you're breaking it down. Don't necessarily think about what baits you're supposed to use as much as like when I practice with, I have a finesse, like an ultra finesse, like weightless application. I'll have a deep bait, I'll have a middle bait. Like I'm trying to cover different water columns, different color variants, and different styles. So, you'll have like a chatterbait and a square bill, which are similar but different. And then you kind of figure out what you want. Now, am I going to use the same color at the tournament that I used at practice? Probably not, because it probably won't work. But that's, you figure out, okay, and it's what's really weird about this sport, and that's what I like about, and that's why I started making YouTube videos, was it gets so freaking detailed sometimes. Like when I was at the body of water I was at on Sunday, they only wanted a specific swim bait casted at a 45-degree angle over 4 feet of water, pulling it back to 8 feet of water. If I went out to 10 feet of water and cast it at a 45-degree angle, I wouldn't catch them. But if I was in 8 feet of water, I would.
Yeah.
And it was only docks that had wood next to them. But docks that didn't have wood next to them, they wanted nothing to do with. Like, it gets that granular some days. And then other days, you could throw this with a treble hook on it.
Right.
Bass.
Yeah, the old Budweiser can lure, right?
Yeah. It's funny. Yep. We have a lot of. So if you guys, in case you guys don't know, people in the chat, this is a competitor in our trail. This is the director of our tournament trail.
Thank you, Pete.
So we have quite a few guys. Yeah. So I tried starting Slay Nation last year, and I just never had the patience to get all the permits and dealing with all the crap at the state. So I give Pete all the credit in the world for having to deal with all the. Vermont's very, to be honest, I appreciate it because they do control some of, you don't get the Chickamauga effect where there is a 200 boat tournament 7 days a week. Now, granted, Champlain probably has that, but let's be honest, Champlain can kind of sustain that.
Absolutely.
But the kayak trail thing is like, I really wish more people would get into it because it's accessible. It's like you can do it, and I mean, realistically, you could compete with us in a sit-in if you wanted to. You're gonna have a harder time, but you can compete. And I mean, look at Brad. Brad comes out there in a paddle kayak, and he's fishing against guys in a John boat with a trolling motor. Like, I mean, you can do it, and it's accessible. It's really what you make of it. And like I said, if anybody goes into a grassroots tournament trail thinking they're going to get rich, that's not the point. The point is really to improve your skill, get better at fishing. And the other thing is, a lot of times in my experience, the grassroots kayak trails, they're more of a community. Like, what you guys don't see in my tournament videos is after the video is over, I've been talking to him for 2 weeks now about Miles. Hey, what did you find there? What did you see? We're not going to be like, yeah, it's perch colored swim bait, 1/8 ounce on. We're not going to give those details, but like you talk about like what you caught on. It's a community. It's a bunch of guys really fishing together. Now I won't lie. Once 7 o'clock hits, you guys are all dead to me until 2 o'clock. It's just how my brain operates. I'm just too hyper competitive. I'll be friendly and nice to people, but I'm in kill mode for that window of time. But then as soon as 2 o'clock hits, we're all friends again. But that's what's cool about it, is that you get these guys that want to, like, look at our group chat. Like, everybody in our group chat is like, hey, I'm going fishing this weekend. Who wants to go? It's not like, oh, I hate you guys because you took my money. It's more of a group of people that are hanging out. It's really just, the competition is just something we do while we're there.
Right. Somebody needs a paddle. We had an extra one, Matthew, but he ended up not needing it that day. But same thing, batteries, I think was it Kent that needed a battery or something? And or Jason, I can't remember who it was, but I sent a message of a guy locally that carries some lithiums, and hey, hit this guy up, see if he's got any. And he had them, and they're happy, and we're all here to help each other. Like you said, we're not here to make money. If we are, we're I don't know anybody that's in our group that's here to make money. We're here to enjoy. We're here to have fun. We're here to learn and meet some good people. And that's what I think we have in this trail. And ideally,
Yep.
next year we grow the trail.
Yep. Exactly. I think it's hard to find in Vermont, especially. It's a weird state, and I finally
Vermont's a
have
weird
somebody
state
from
when it
this
comes to
area
this.
that I've been saying this to all my viewers, and a lot of these guys, a lot of these people, like so John Wilson, Scott Vermonter is actually from down south in Vermont, but a lot of the people that watch this, they get it, but they don't get it. This is a trout state. We're famous for Champlain, and that's the bass mecca, and blah blah blah. But I'll tell you right now, I have fished Champlain a total of this many times this year. I just don't have any desire to go get beat up in cross waves when I can go to a pond 20 minutes from my house and catch 4 pounders. It's just not worth my time. But Vermont is very tailored to trout, and a lot of guys that fish here are trolling for trout. They're trolling for salmon. They're catfishing. They're bullhead fishing from the bank. There isn't as many hardcore bass fishing guys as you would think in this state. There is a lot of guys who bass fish, but they're all heading to Champlain. They're not doing like the small ponds. And in my opinion, you learn more in a 200-acre pond than you will ever learn on a lake, because that 200-acre pond could have one section of flat that is sand bottom that you have to work a specific type of bait. But then 30 yards down, you have a grass mat. And then 30 yards from that, you've got stumps. Like you can have every possible ecosystem in a short stretch where you could learn and dial in different techniques. Whereas Champlain, you sometimes got to go a mile down lake to find a different type of environment. And that's something that I think is so key to like the kayak world, is that you don't have the ability to just go run 4 miles to hit the next spot. So if you're fishing with a smaller vessel, fishing a small pond, one, to be honest, I don't think you could put a, I mean, I guess you could, but like, what would you put like a Phoenix in miles? Like
I mean,
$100,000 bass
it'd
boat
be
in
tough to
there?
launch. I mean, we launched our 18-foot duck boat, and we got it on and off the trailer, and you could put a Phoenix in there. But again, if you're going to do that, you're probably going up to Magog. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's one of those things. There's bigger, better almost everywhere that you are in Vermont, or the guys are going to run to the river, Connecticut.
yep,
So,
yep,
yeah, and I mean, that's like you're saying. That's what I love about this. I mean, Chinton and Rez, Nick and I have never been up there. My God, we put in there, and right at the ramp, I'm like, dude, we're gonna catch 5 pound smallmouth all day long, and
yep.
and I
No, we'd
love
log there
fishing
every
weed
so often.
lines and logs and that.
Yep,
I'm really good at that. I'm whether it's luck or just all the time I have on the water, I know where to cast. I do a good job of picking a fish out of that. Like you said, my kids go through it. I'll back the boat in when we're in the boat. I'll back the boat in because I normally I'm on the trolling motor, so they get first shot, and then they get mad at me when I pull one out of. Dad, we just cast it in there 5 times.
yep,
It's just where you place that bait. But when we went up there, Nick and I were in heaven because smallmouth, I truly love catching and playing with smallmouth. And
yep.
and we went there and I worked so hard the day. We were in really
Down
heavy wind that day we went to pre-fish that. Somebody from our trail kind of was like, you guys are nuts. Because we were, and
right.
asked Nick, we took a couple of sideways and he was like, yeah, we got to get out of here. I'm like, yeah, we're moving. Um,
That place can get rough.
it got really rough. I was shocked. But it's
Yeah,
because it's way up there in the mountains, right? And it funnels. But
yep,
like, I mean, I was in heaven and we found fish on beds. And I mean, we just caught a whole lot of 14-inch, 15-inch fish. And I'm like, where are the big ones? And then, all the big fish that we caught, all the big fish that were caught in a tournament were all largemouth. I was
yep.
dumbfounded. Like, there's good largemouth water there, but there's way better smallmouth water there. But I think the smallmouth are competing with the walleye, and the largemouth are competing with tiny little panfish. So the largemouth are growing, and the smallmouth aren't.
I went there the weekend before to practice, and every boulder that was above the water had a bed on. Tournament day, I'd see a single fish on a bed. A week later, it was done. Spawn was over.
Yeah,
And every freaking place that you would think there would be a bass bed, the weekend I went, there was a freaking bass on a bed. And the following weekend, there wasn't any. Now, granted, like I said, we got lucky because we called a 13 and a 12 and a half with two 16 and a quarters. So we had a huge jump in the last hour, or we
Yeah.
wouldn't have even done as well as we did. And I was useless. I had freaking COVID. I felt like crap.
Yeah, you were
I
sick.
had dog issues going on with the dog that I ended up putting down, and it was just not a good day for me. That's why I keep saying like Miles is going to be a big event for me because I didn't have a single fish entered in that tournament. They were all Matt. Like he caught all of them.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need redemption because I just wasn't on my game. I could have caught more fish, but I just wasn't mentally into it. And I was spinning out because what I had planned didn't work out. The whole shoreline that I had planned on fishing basically all day was dead and there was nothing on it. And I'm not talking like no bass. I'm talking there was no bluegill, there was
Right.
no perch. It was a barren wasteland of activity. And 6 days before that, it was so loaded with everything that I was positive that we were going to be able to get a limit in the first hour. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing about tournament fishing is that I fished 4th of July at Miles. The weather conditions for that day are, as of right now, pretty similar to how the weather conditions are going to be on Sunday. But there's not going to be a boat parade. There's not going to be as much activity. And it's going to be probably an entirely different day because we're going to have, like I said, 16 different rods all focused on fishing. Whereas I
Yeah.
was pretty much the one fishing there when I went there.
Yeah.
There's a few kids from the dock, which and that's the other thing. Like when I come up on a dock, if I'm fun fishing and somebody's on their dock, I just don't fish
Right. We had
because
that on Sunday. Sunday was the only, I mean, there was quite a bit of pontoon, just cruisers.
yeah,
Kind of looked like a parade, but not really. They weren't talking or anything. But there was one bigger boat that doesn't have any business being on that lake. And
yeah,
they went out first and did a blow donut and a loop around full speed ahead and shut the motor down, turn around, go full speed the other way. But then they grabbed a tube and were just, a couple times I thought the kids were dying. They were screaming like bloody murder, but they created a massive series of wakes. Just if I had a boat on those docks, I would be crying with how
yeah,
much boat waves there were. But same thing, I had a dock where a guy was reading. I quickly made one flip near it, had a fish pick up. I saw the fish. I just let it swim and drop my bait. We peeled out of there. We went back
yeah,
later, never found that fish, but I did catch another one in the same general area later. And we had a couple other times where, like you said, a little kid fishing or people were sitting in their boat getting it ready. I just peel right by that, you know.
yeah. I
Um,
know. I know some guys, and now don't get me wrong. If I'm fishing a tournament, it might be a different thought process. But if I'm fun fishing and there's somebody sunbathing on their dock, I'm not gonna because for two reasons. One, it's kind of a respect thing, but two,
right?
that's gonna be the time I plink my freaking jig off the side of their dock and make it a loud ting.
Yeah,
You know,
whack the pontoon.
and I've done that so many times. But yeah, it's just it's that event, guys. Like I said, if you want to watch a video, that's going to be the tournament to watch because that's honestly the thing I like and hate the most about our trail is the fact that we're doing it paper style and we're not doing like the tournament app. So for those of you who don't know, normally when you do a kayak tournament, you submit your fish on an app and a leaderboard is actively updated as you do that and you can go check and see where you're at. We don't have that. We are doing everything through photo albums and it increases my anxiety because I don't know if I'm doing good or not. And you think you're doing good, and then you look out and you see somebody off a point pull up a fish, and you see him pull up what looks like a 15, and they just throw it back without measuring it, and you go, "Oh shit, maybe they have a bigger bag than I think they do because why did they just get rid of that without even throwing it on a board?" But then the other thing is for me, I actually had a rule when I could check the leaderboard that I didn't check the leaderboard until I had a limit.
That's a good
I
rule. I've done
I
a few of
refuse
the
to check
live
it.
tournaments. that you're talking about. And that, like the very first one I did, I caught the very first fish of the whole tournament, and I was pumped. And I had an area with fish that were bedding and big fish, and all my big fish left. All I had was the bucks, and I struggled in my own brain. I then
Yep.
spun out. I had one good fish that was still on a bed. I could not get her to trigger, and the male was hitting it every time it went in the bed. And then one time he picked it up and swam off with it, and I nothing I could do. I had to set the hook, or he was going to swallow it. So I had to set the hook, and she left, and I spun out. And I literally that tournament was a launch from anywhere in this area. So I
Yep.
literally went back to the boat ramp, put back in the truck, drove down to another boat ramp, and completely shifted my whole game plan because of what you're saying. I spun out, and
Yep.
that hurt me in that tournament. I wasn't going to place anyway because you needed 100 inches to well, you
Right.
didn't need 100 to place, but I in my brain knew I needed 100, which it ended up being, I think it was 100 and a quarter won it. So,
Right.
but again, I spun out because of what you're saying. So it does take a lot of that whole skill and knowledge, and you have to be able to check yourself sometimes.
So I'm gonna ask you, what do you think's gonna win Miles? Just out of curiosity, what do you think the fish
Okay,
is?
well, to be honest with you, the first trip we went out, I thought somebody might get 100 and win it.
I thought
The
it was gonna be
second
50.
trip we went out, I have proven, and when we left there during the day, I thought 100 could be legitimized.
Yeah, me too.
But now after two trips, the 100 is going to be split between all of us in my brain.
Yeah.
I'm guessing if somebody could catch two fish over 19, they should win it.
Yep.
So, with that being said, the biggest problem there is catching a 15-inch fish.
Mm-hmm.
We've only put one 15-inch on the board out of two trips.
Yep.
So, what that says to me is, yeah, there's going to be a 20. We've got two fish over 20 that we've measured in the last two trips. But we don't have 10 fish that are over 19 and a half. So I've been pretty close. Of course, Hortonia got me. I thought
That always
85.
is. Yeah.
I thought
I thought
I thought
85. That's my
yeah,
home
I
lake.
thought 85 was going to be a good number, and if somebody could catch 90, they would win. So when we came in with 92 and a quarter or whatever we had, I thought, oh my God, we have a chance to win this. And we only upgraded that at the end there with that 19 and a half.
Yeah.
Chittenden, I knew I had Chittenden pegged to the money almost exactly, except we were 2 inches above what we thought because we had an area that Nick was throwing a frog, and he's just like, they're not coming out. And I said, dude, throw one right in that hole. You got 50-pound braid on, throw it in there and rip it out. And that big 18-inch bit, and that's how we won that. We won that tournament, and we fished all new water to us except one area where we caught a 16-inch fish. Everything else was new water because of what you said. We had gone out, we found a lot of 15 to 16s, 14 and a half to 16 maybe. But I also knew that a lot of them were going to be leaving because they were the last ones on the bed. So a week later, I knew they may not be there. So we didn't take that gamble and go to that known water. We went and fished all new water, hoping that our brain let us just fish. And that's how we got lucky enough to win that
We
tournament.
took the gamble and we ended up on the side you ended up on. So I mean, your guess was better than mine for that reason. It was crazy. Like, so I was looking at, like, I said the same thing with Miles. Like, I knew some people that posted some photos, and I've been talking to some people that fish there regularly, and they're like, yeah, you could get 19s and 20s all day. And I'm like, okay, so maybe this is going to be the lake, which would not have been the lake I would have expected a century for when we got Magog and Bombazine coming up. But,
Right.
and then, but now I think you're right. I think what's going to happen is you're going to get guys that are going to have a limit. You're going to start with a limit of like 12s, and then you're going to have to get a couple kickers to get you over top. And that's
Yeah.
what's crazy is like, that's why I'm saying this is going to be the one to watch, because this is going to be that tournament. If we have any tournament this year, this is going to be that tournament that at 155, a dude nets a fish, throws it on the measuring board as fast as he possibly can, and takes that photo. And then when he gets to the ramp, realizes that that was the one that, and that's what's cool about the whole not knowing is like, even in Hortonia, like we had the last fish we caught was ultimately the one that put us ahead. And it was within the last hour that we caught that fish. But the fact is like, Matt kept saying, I think we're good. I'm like, no, that's not how tournaments work. Like, you don't stop fishing until I literally set an alarm on my phone for 1:30, 1:45, and then 1:55. And I have an alarm going off on my phone because I need that mental, like, okay, this is my last cast. I need to make sure I get this fish in and measured as quickly as possible. Because there's been so many times, like I said, the Chin and Rest tournament, we literally caught the 2 fish that moved us up in the last hour. And that's the last hour. But sometimes literally that one last cast, 2 inches. I mean, every one of the events has been like a couple inches here or there between first and second. It
Yeah.
hasn't been like a huge, there hasn't been like somebody ran away with it and there was no way you were catching them. It was always like, okay, well, it came down to, it wasn't even like the lengths. It was like, you got a 19 and a quarter and I got a 19. You got an 18 and a half. I got an 18. It wasn't even like, it was literally like somebody got a quarter or a half more on each fish.
Yep.
Totaled out for the final value. And that's actually what's cool about it is I'm actually trying to do that. I actually rigged up this specifically. I rigged up a hat cam because I want to actually film the land because it's cool watching that board get filled out.
Yep.
Because like, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, wait, maybe. And then you see somebody else come in and you're like, oh, I don't know. He's got something like, it's kind of like the anticipation, not knowing.
Yeah, it's
I
like
think
a
I
real
like that.
weigh-in tournament. It's the same concept.
'Cause
It's
I
kind
don't
of
like it.
exciting.
Yeah. It's I think is my head. So when I played beer gut softball, I didn't let anybody tell me the score. If I knew the score, it affected how I played.
Yeah.
It's just how it was. If we were winning, I would slack off. If we were losing, I would make stupid mistakes trying to force the issue. And I do the
Right.
same thing when I'm fishing. So if I know the score and I'm down by 4 inches in a tournament, I'm more likely to make that stupid move. I'm more likely to go, you know what? We're picking up and going across the lake when we should stay where we're at and keep working the program. And that's
Right.
what really helps me is not knowing the score is I set a number in my head, which I think every tournament angler really does that. Like anybody who practices or has done enough events, you kind of set a like, I need this number. But then when you get to that number, it's not enough. Like you get to that
Right.
number, like, okay, cool. I'm probably in third now. Now I need to work. And
Yep.
sometimes, like I said, there was like the Shelburne Pond tournament when we took fourth. I thought we had actually a better bag than we did until I came around the corner and I saw Brian scoop up like a 14 and just immediately like didn't even throw it on his measuring board. And then he scooped up another one and threw it in, and I was like it wasn't necessarily bigger than what we had, but the fact that he had so much disregard for that fish that he
Right.
wasn't even measuring it for the quarter inch, I was like, maybe we don't have the bag that we think we do because you see your competitor just kind of ignoring fish that you're kind of like, I kind of wish I had that one to cull out my small one. Then and it's weird how the totals work too because sometimes you'll have like a 12 but then you'll have like a 17, so then like
Right.
you think that you have a smaller bag than you do, but then when you do the math, because I actually I started using an Excel sheet. I don't know if you do, what I did is I put an Excel sheet on my phone and I put in every fish and then I auto sort largest to smallest. So it kind of auto culls it. So I
Yeah.
know how many inches we have. And it's kind of nice, but then I keep looking at it going, I don't know,
Right.
So it's almost like bad that I'm doing that because then I'm like, well, we're at this, but I don't think this is enough. And you're always
Yeah.
kind of like more. And I think that's what it's going to be. Is I think the guy who has that one sneaky bait, or the guy who has that one spot that you didn't think to fish, and that's the thing that people don't realize that about bass that I think is the biggest shallow water thing is bass do what I call refilling. So you go to a
Yep.
dock, you catch 3 fish on it, right? That dock isn't dead for the rest of the day. And a
No.
lot of people will never go back to that dock because they think all the fish are gone. If you knew how many fish were in a body of water, you'd be shocked. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of bass in there. And they'll come in, they'll hang out on that dock, they'll eat some bluegill, they'll do their thing, they'll go back out, and then another one comes back. So if there is a 5-pounder on that dock, there will be a 5-pounder on that dock again. It may not be the same fish, but the big fish is there for a reason. It's, bucks will be bucks and you'll catch those everywhere. But the big
Right.
fish you'll find, and that's really what you're doing when you're tournament practicing, kind of getting back to that topic, is like when you find a big one, you have to mentally make a why was he here? Was he a rogue fish, or was he on that stick? Or was he
Yep.
on that lily pad, that one lily pad? Because it's always something stupid like that. It's not like, oh, he was in this grass patch. It's like he's in that weird lily pad that's shaped like a U. That for some reason he's on that one pad. And that is where you get those spots and you write down those waypoints, and then all of a sudden you go back to the tournament and it's like, okay, that's where that one was, and that's where that one was. And then again, when you have that kind of game plan and then you go to do it and Chris is already on that dock flipping his Senko in before I can get there, then I got to pivot again. And that's what makes the whole thing, that's what makes the sport fun. I think having ADHD, I think that's why I've stuck with the sport, because there's no mastering fishing.
No way.
It's impossible, because our ball has a brain and adapts to us. You can get good at football, you can be a professional athlete at football, you can be good at baseball, but at the end of the day, you learn a core set of skills and you keep honing those skills. With bass fishing, it is like literally you could fish 7 days a week on the same body of water and not have the same result twice. And
Same day. I went Saturday. I went to an area up our way that's not normally accessible by boat, the launch. Yeah, I go there all the time with the kayak. But I went in the morning with my father to make sure I could launch the boat, because we were going to go watch the fireworks with one of my children and her husband and their child. And so I went to that area. We got the boat in. I had to work a little bit. My arms were a little sore after, but I got the boat off. And then my dad and I went fishing until like 10:30. And we did good, but everything was short striking, everything. And then I tried different things. I told my dad, I said, try this, do this with it. And he got a couple nice fish. And then we bailed out of there because he had to go home. I had to get back home and do some chores before we went out at night. And then we went and launched there again with my daughter and her husband and my wife and one of my grandkids. And we went and I got the boat off the trailer and we went back fishing, and the fish were just engulfing the same stuff we were doing before. They were just hammering, like hitting, like they were mad at the bait. And it was it was an evening bite compared to a morning bite, but it was the same kind of stuff. Everything was similar. It just that same day, and that's what's exciting. That's what's so cool about this trail is we're all going to new places. We're going to new bodies of water. We're having to call the audible like you and I did at Chitin and Rez. Like we're all going to have to do at Mills. It's going to be, I've been within 2 inches other than Hortonia, which I said, if somebody could get over 90, they would win it hands down. Which it took 3 of us over 90. That's the only one. But again, I had 1 day down there, which I should have had 2, but we just weren't able to make it work. And I would never, when Nick caught that 22, we were dumbfounded. We were just like, are you kidding me? We knew the 20 and a half that I caught that day, Nick had caught the week before. So we knew that one. But that 22 it like boggled our mind. We're like, oh my God, wait a minute. This is not good. We just caught a 22-inch fish. That means there's plenty of over 20s in this lake. We better step up our game. And that 19 and a half to end the day helped us to get second, or we wouldn't have had second. So it's just one of those things,
That place is interesting because it is a lot of resident fish too. So like that's one of the reasons why I started doing a kayak trail, because, and it sounds like a brag and sounds like a big head ego thing, but like I can go there. I haven't gone there in 2 months and not caught at least an 18 every time I've gone.
Oh, I'll bet. Now that I know it, I could almost I wouldn't bet that I would go there because I don't bet on anything, but I could go there and catch over an 18 every time
Yeah,
I go there now.
yeah, and it's just figuring the pattern out, and that's what it is all about. Is really pattern. So we had a question, and I'm actually curious about this for you because I know my answer, but do you stop and eat during a tournament, or do you just run and gun the whole time and worry about it later?
Um, I am my own worst enemy. But I've gotten better with age. I'm old. Um, like I said, I have grandkids and everything. I will. I'm really good at if, especially if we're changing spots. I will grab a cheese and pepperoni type
Yeah,
thing or a cracker thing. I'm a junk food junkie. I love snacks, so I'll do a snack. But if I'm fishing, I focus way too much, and my kids are now trained by my wife to yell at me to drink, so at
yep,
least I'm drinking. But if I'm if I'm especially at where we're going Sunday. If I'm there and I'm in the area where I know I have to catch a couple good fish out of that, I won't do anything but fish. And
yep.
like you said, I'm going to have two rods set with the same bait times at least two. I'm going to have two baits
Yep,
that will have at least two rods set up and rigged, ready to go. So if I break off, I have another one to throw right back in there.
yep. See, my problem is I have a weird metabolism, so if I eat, I'm in the bathroom in 20 minutes. It's just a thing
Yeah.
for me. So I do. So like for this tournament, because of the weather, I'm literally already bought. I'm gonna have Gatorade that I'm gonna pound on the way up, so I have some salt in me to retain the water. And
Yeah.
then I do like the powdered energy drinks, and it's just simply because at least I'm getting some water and not just corn syrup with my energy in the morning. And then I switch to water. But I can't if I eat, my stomach will be messed up the rest of the day. The
Yeah.
problem with that, and you've seen it, and you guys that watch my videos don't see it, is I look like a fucking zombie at the end of a tournament because I have been running, redlining my body for 8 hours, and then I get to the weigh-in and I hit the boat ramp. I started like the Gatorade thing as a lesson learned because one day I was actually at Hortonia and I fished all day, loaded my kayak, and woke up in my truck on my steering wheel. I have
Wow.
no idea how I loaded my boat because I don't remember loading my kayak, and my kayak was loaded, strapped down, put away. I got in my truck and passed out from heat
Wow.
exhaustion. And like woke up to text messages from my wife like, "Are you coming home? Where are you? What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And it made me realize like I need, and that's why I have like a 60-ounce like stainless steel that I basically fill with just ice and just kind of let it melt throughout the day. So by the time I want it, it's just cold water.
Yeah.
But I don't eat. And it's because my stomach will betray me, and then I will end up having to go back to the ramp and stop fishing. But what I will do is I did find for some reason, and I don't know why this is, but Cliff Bars don't screw with my stomach. So I
That's a
will eat
great
one of
option.
those, and it's salty. It's got a little bit of it holds in water because it's all granola and all that, so it does
Right.
help. So I
It
keep
has
one
the
of those in my
protein in them,
kayak.
so that the protein will sustain that sugar, which is
Yep,
I coach high school soccer.
yep,
That's where I was this morning or this afternoon. No, we were a few minutes late, but that's one thing I've learned throughout the years is you need either the peanut butters or the Cliff Bars or the protein bars right after you're working out. And on a day like what we do, it sounds funny. You and I both have pedal drives. We're working out like you've seen us leave the boat launch. Nick and I. Now he's got an electric trolling motor on his, but I mean we hit it, and I go full speed if pretty much full speed on my pedal drive until I get to that first spot.
yep,
And
yep,
I mean, granted, this lake's only a mile, 1.1 mile long, basically from ramp to that beaver hut down at the far end. But with that being said, 4.5 miles an hour at for a half a mile is a
I
haul.
I hooked a Fitbit to my ankle one time.
Oh
Just
wow.
curious, just curious, and it was like 40,000 or 50,000 steps in a day of fishing. Because what people don't realize, and it's there's no way to explain it until you do it, but I can fish 10 hours fun fishing, no problem. 6 hours of a tournament, you are done.
Yeah,
You
toast
are
you, cooks you.
mentally and physically. I used to play, men's league softball tournaments in 90-degree heat, playing a physical sport, right? I mean, baseball isn't that physical, but it is way more physical than fishing should be. I'm way more exhausted after an 8-hour window of a tournament in kayak fishing than I have ever been playing any sport that I've ever played. And I used to play pickup basketball and football and all of that, soccer. Like, it's a crazy thing. It's actually, they did some science to it. I know Bassmasters at one point hooked up like all these monitors to like pros, and it was amazing. Like, they were burning like thousands and thousands of calories in a day of fishing in a bass boat. Now you have to add in, I'm not in a bass boat, so all
Right.
my movement is pedaling. So not only am I casting and changing body position and reeling and moving my arms, I'm also basically pedaling a bike for 8 hours straight. Because
Right.
you're really like, if you go back and like watch any of my videos, it's very rare that my feet aren't on the pedals, and there's a reason for that. Because the wind picks up, I got to pedal to adjust, and then the wind blows the other way, and then I got to back pedal, and then I hook a fish, and then I got to back pedal, and then I got to move up. Like, you're constantly doing
Yeah.
this all day long, and this all day long.
And how about
And
those little red twirly weeds that are at where we're going this weekend? Those little boys wrap up in that propeller. Nick and I are going to take our drives apart a little bit and clean them out because there's so much stuff that gets in there.
I saw a hack, and I don't know if I dare do it. I
A
saw a
razor
hack.
blade.
Guys are actually taping razor blades to their props to like cut back on.
Yeah, I thought about it, but you know what? I don't. Yeah, it affects me a little bit, and where we're gonna catch some of our fish, I'm gonna need to be diligent on making sure that I'm taking care of my drive. Because, I mean, my God, that would be catastrophic out there. Small place like that to have a drive go bad, to have to paddle. Not now. Granted, I could do it if I had to, but I don't want to. I have much more control the way I fish.
Yep.
But I thought about it, but I don't mind checking it, and
I'd end up
um,
cutting myself. I'd end up picking my kayak up, like
yeah,
pack up at the end of the day, and I'd forget that that blade was there, and I'd end up slicing my hand open.
yeah, I would worry about that. I've also landed a fish or two out of the drive, and because they do get in there. No matter what you do, no matter how
Yep.
good you think you are at it, they will go in there. Nick had one take him into the trolling motor the other day. Um,
Yep.
it's just one more thing that I could be a failure, and
Yeah.
I don't need it to be.
That's
I have enough problems myself. I don't need to create more.
that's the thing. I think what makes tournaments so exhausting is, and if anybody goes back and watches any of my tournament videos, you'll notice one thing that I'm doing more than any other video. I'm literally reeling in a fish, and I'm doing this because I'm looking for the next cast before I even boat that fish. Because your brain is on a different time level because every minute counts. And some days it feels like, holy shit, how is it already noon? And then other days it's like, it's only 9. Like, it's a weird. Shelburne Pond was like that. I kept asking Matt what time it was. He's like, dude, it's 9:30. And I'm like, there's no fucking way it's only 9:30.
You
I'm
guys
like,
smashed them
there's
at the
one.
beginning of that day. You were just
We
catching
were
all the
on them.
small ones.
We were on them, and the mistake we made and that's why I want redemption. So 2 tournaments in a row, I made the wrong decision on Shelburne Pond. I wanted to fish the opposite side, and we were catching, but we weren't getting the quality, and I thought we needed more. And we wasted basically 2 hours on the opposite side that we didn't catch, and that was because I got anxious and wanted to go do it. And you guys got to understand that my strategy, fishing with bear fishing, is complicated because he is a straight up finesse fanatic. He doesn't give a shit about a moving bait, and I am chatterbait, square bill, swim jig. My idea of finesse up until last year was a football jig. Like, that was as finessey as I got, and that's not finesse, but that's slowing down and dragging. That was finesse to me. So for me to stop and fish a Ned rig or a wacky rig or to consider a drop shot was not ever going to happen. Tournaments did that to me. But the problem is I have a different clock when it comes to fishing, because I will go to an area, I will break it down, and I have 9 rods. So I'll cast this bait and that bait and this bait, and I'm done and I'm out. And I'll turn around and he's fishing a log. And now what do? Because the first tournament, I made him follow me because it's, again, the body of water I know. But the second tournament, he picked us up. The third tournament, he picked us up. So I've learned to adapt. And for those of you who don't understand, the way our tournament trail works, we can't be more than 30 yards apart. I can't just go fish over there and meet up with him later. We have to be next to each other. So I have to figure out, okay, if he's going to go fish that, I'm going to go deeper and work some sort of reaction bait, because my brain does not allow for me to fish the same log with him with a wacky rig. And sometimes that's actually a detriment, because sometimes you get too much crap going on one piece of cover and you're going to scare those fish away. So I've had to learn not only my internal clock, but I've had to learn I run and gun when I fish. I've been known to like do 2 laps around the lake in a tournament when I was fishing tournaments by myself. And now I've started even practicing. I'll literally go practice. The first day I practice Miles, I practice as if I was him and finesse and dinked and dunked. And then the second day I went there with all reaction baits and practiced as if I was me, so that I can be like, okay, you're going to stop. I know how you are. We actually had a moment at Fairfield when we were fishing on Sunday where he pulls up next to me. I didn't even realize it, and I watched the video after. I thought he told me where he wanted to go next. He literally pulled up next to me, gave me a look. I reeled up my bait, hooked it on my eye, and I was like, yeah, let's go fish the grass. And then he started laughing. I didn't realize it's because he didn't tell me anything. He just gave me a look, and I knew he wanted to go to the other side of the lake. We've gotten to that point, and that's what really is cool about this team thing. And that's something that I'm learning, because I did the first couple of years I did by myself. Now that I have a teammate, I have to take into account what is he going to want to do. And it's helped me because I'm more likely to just bail on fish to try to find bigger fish.
Yeah, the teammate thing is super exciting. Like, that's part of why I don't fish the big boat tournaments that much anymore. I did really well as a non-boater in the big boat tournaments. I never like was AOI or anything like that, but I was not in the bottom. I was in the middle of the pack. And I complimented my fishing is complemented by different styles of front boaters. I can adapt a little because I've done, like you learned, I learned streams, lake trout fishing, fishing rivers. I've done it all my life. So it's really unique. The team thing is awesome. And Nick and I are doing a good job. Nick is my oldest, and he liked fishing when he was younger, but he never had the drive to fish beyond just going out and having fun with me and my dad. And now he's really got the drive. He's learning. He wants to learn. He's got that desire to absorb what's happening around him now. And we are learning from each other and how we both fish. And that's what's another part of this trail. It's super exciting. I feel bad for like Brian, where Dustin had some problems and couldn't fish. And I feel really bad for Brad. He just didn't know anybody. I hoping next year I can get him one of the other kids, or I have another couple buddies that have kayaks that are very good fishermen. I almost don't want to introduce them because they would be another competition to us. Not that I mean, we all are. Everybody in this trail has the potential to go huge, that's another exciting thing, and that's why I'm really worried about this tournament. I know what is possible there. I know. I mean, honestly, we had I think it was 99 or 99 and a half the first day we went up there, between Nick, myself, and one of my stepsons, in a boat. But we were all fishing the same area, the same water, and we would have had 99-ish inches. And then Nick and I just went up, and I don't think we had 90. We might have had 90. We weren't being super critical on our measuring this last trip up because we had nothing else, no side tournament or anything else going on. But I think, somebody could win this with 90, but that one person, if they get to the the first 5 big fish before anybody else, they could get 100, So,
Yeah.
but that's what's exciting about this.
The team trail, I think the team thing has changed how I approach fishing because, like I said, it's one of those like and that's how I fish. Like Hortonia, for example, when I fish that place, I do a circuit. It's literally the same circuit. I go this way, that way, this way, that way, and then I'm done. And when I fish by myself, I sometimes don't even realize how much water I've covered unless I go back and look at like my GPS and I'm like, holy shit, I covered like 4 miles today because I just literally run up and down a bank. But he has taught me like 6 inches of water doesn't mean there's not fish there. Like he'll catch fish sometimes, and I'm like, where? And it's not like like Chin and Res, that water's clean. Like you can
Yeah.
see. You're not looking at
So
murky
is
water.
Mills.
Yeah, you're not looking at chocolate milk water. You can see the bottom, but fish they're good at camouflaging themselves. And like that's the thing I've learned is like and the other thing I learned is bait strategy. So I sent him a list before I returned it. This is what I'm fishing. And then he sends me a list of what he's fishing. The biggest mistake that you make in a tournament when you're fishing with a teammate is if you're both fishing the same color and same bait, you're not ruling anything out. So all you're doing is both accomplishing, oh, we're not catching on this color. But if I'm running, even if it's the same technique, but slightly different color, now we know, was it the profile? Was it the color? Was it the presentation? The other thing is he fishes his finesse baits very active. He's pumping his baits. He's not. I dead stick almost all of my finesse baits. My finesse baits, I'm basically throwing it out there and letting the plastic do its own thing, and then I pull it back. So that's something that I've learned is dialing it in early. So I watch what he does, where he casts, and I start doing the math because he's not, and it's not. It sounds like a negative, like it's like he's a rookie or something, but he's just there to have fun. He's
Right.
still not in that like extreme hyper competitive mental state that I'm in. So I'm over analyzing everything. So I'll watch him and see where he casts, what he did. If he catches a fish, I observe everything about it. But then what that does is I then break it down, and then that helps me isolate down. Okay, so he casted to the third pillar in the dock, and he had a wacky rig on. So I'm going to try casting to the third pillar of the dock with a different color. Was it the bait or was it the color? Okay, that didn't work. So now I'm going to throw a Ned rig to that third pillar of the dock. Was it just the position? And then eventually, 2 hours in, now I've kind of pared down. And then what I do in a tournament, I don't know if you do that, but what I do in a tournament is if I catch a fish, like a scoreable fish on a bait, that bait's locked on my rod for the rest of the day.
Yeah,
I
I'm
have 9 rods.
pretty much that happens. I've kind of I've dialed my techniques in, and I stick to certain, like you say, color doesn't really matter, but I have the colors that I have the confidence in,
Yep.
and that's all I buy now. I
Yep.
used to buy, two of this, 2 bags of that color, 2 bags of that color, 2 bags of that. Now there's certain baits I only have like 2 colors, maybe 3 colors in it, and that's it.
I used to buy all the stuff, and a lot of that's still there because I don't use it anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah, oh yeah.
I
That's
basically
what
have three
Nick right
colors.
now. Nick the other day was throwing something that it was bags of stuff I had to begin the year to get him better prepared for what we were going to be doing. I said, "Here, this is all stuff that works. It's all stuff that I have caught fish on. It's all stuff that I like, but I don't use it right now. So
Yep.
go through here. If you think it looks good, grab it." And he was throwing a bait, and he's like, "Oh, it's there. I don't know what color it is, but it's it." I said, "Oh, that," and I listed the color. He goes, "Oh yeah,
Yep.
that's right," because I know the bait. I knew
Yep.
exactly once he described it. I knew what he was using. It's a bait I don't even throw on anymore unless I'm doing one specific thing. Which so far none of the lakes we've been on have that. But he's throwing it and fishing a way that I fish, and the bait I'm throwing is 180 different. One of us is more of a creature, one of us is more of a minnow, and we're
Yep.
throwing and doing the exact same thing with it. But because we're throwing the 2 different presentations into similar holes, we're pulling out nicer fish.
I have baits that don't make any sense that I'll throw, and it's like you said. A lot of times, I always say it's like a weird like juju thing, but it's like confidence travels down that line. I have baits. I have break glass. I literally pack So when I pack for a tournament, I prep myself. I pack. I tie all my baits that I'm going to use, and like you said, I cut. Even if it's the same freaking bait that I'm already going to fish in that rod that's already tied, it gets cut and retied because for some reason I need that knot to be fresh. It's probably
Oh,
sometimes
absolutely.
not. It could be a worse knot the second time than it was originally, but it's still retied. But then I also pack. I have a blue tackle box that's like my second loadout, and I actually pick baits that I'm going to change to. And a lot of times it's still category. So like if it's a swim jig rod, it might be a black and blue swim jig versus a green pumpkin swim jig because I just need to, or a quarter versus a half. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
then I will tie on the next couple of square bills. I'll have those in that box already pre-designated because I want to try. But the reason I do that is because it's an equation, and people don't realize that bass fishing is literally just narrowing down the variables until you figure out what is working and then just beating that. That's why once I get a bait that catches a score, and I guess I should say, to be clear, in my mind, anything under 15 inches isn't a scoreable fish
Right.
because it sounds selfish and like cocky, but if it's under 15 inches, it's probably not going to win you a tournament unless it's
Right.
a
Well,
really
and
small.
like, so to along those lines, at Chittenden, a 15-inch was a scoreable in my brain,
Yep. Yep.
knowing what we saw beforehand. And I
Right.
knew, don't get me wrong, I knew we needed more than that, but I also know a limit of 15 at least had a chance to get you near.
Yeah.
And then one kicker could be
Yeah.
the difference to put you in the money,
So if I catch
but
something 15 inches or higher, then I'm like, okay, that one's locked in. And it may not be necessarily, it may be locked in the sense of that was a black blue swim jig. I might throw a perch colored swim jig on there. I might stay in that category if I fish for the next 3 hours and don't get a bite on it. But like a square bill, if I catch a fish on a specific square bill, that thing's on that rod the rest of the day. It's
absolutely.
just
Chatterbait,
something
same
about
way.
that square bill.
Yeah, same way. I'm with that same way with a chatterbait. And if I catch one or two decent fish on it, that's the color, that's the weight, that's the size, that's the trailer.
And
Yep.
that's really my goal by the end of the day is like I want to have at least 3 or 4 rods that I can't change. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
then that it what it comes down to, I think it's also my mental thing. It's like I know it works. Why it worked, I don't know. I have no logic behind it, but it worked. So therefore it's gotta work again because it worked once. So and that's the things that's what tournaments do to you. And that's why it's so stressful because you're not only going, oh, I need to catch fish. You're going, okay, I caught fish on the log in 4 feet of water with submergent grass to the right of the log on this bait, and then you start like looking for that everywhere you go, and then you're like, okay, I got it again, and I got a fish on that, so that I know that's a pattern, and then you start working your way around, and then before you know it, it's like 2 o'clock, and you go, holy shit, did we do it or did we get our asses kicked?
Yep.
And that's pretty much how the whole time and the whole tournament. It's like if you could hear our internal monologues on the lake, it would be deafening because everybody is like just processing all this information 100 miles an hour the whole time.
Oh yeah, my brain is. Oh my God, people would go nuts trying to listen to my brain.
So we are going on an hour and 48 minutes. So I'm probably gonna let Chris get some sleep here, and we're gonna end this. He will be back, guys. He's kind of like my de facto backup host. Whenever I have a need and I want to bring somebody on, like I said, me and him talk fishing at least twice a week, if not more. Sometimes we're both trying to incognitally fish information out of each other for the next tournament that we pre-fished, but I think both of us have a good little back and forth. We're like, yeah, I caught nothing there, and then we both post like a 20-incher in our Instagrams, and like, yeah, that 20-incher I didn't catch, but yeah, we'll definitely have him back on. I do want to try to get. I actually want to get some more people from FX together and try to talk different because that's one thing about the rods that like everybody has their own little opinion. So having a bunch of different people that have fished them, it's kind of fun to get different thoughts on different stuff like that too. So and specs and
Yeah,
rods, I will
yeah.
go on.
If you go into the FX owners Facebook page, and people will say, "Hey, I want to do this. What should I do?" You will get 10 different rod suggestions.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it really is. But yeah, we're gonna kick this out right here, guys. I really appreciate you all coming on. We've had 10, 15 people here pretty much the entire duration. So the fact that you listened to us for 2 hours is awesome. If you guys haven't, I would be, not doing my duty. If you have not checked out FX, the show notes, there's a description down there. Use my code, not his, because I'll get credit. Just kidding.
No,
If
that's
you want to check
fine.
out FX Rod, definitely reach out. If you guys have any questions about a rod, about what you should get, what technique, hit me up. If you can't hit me up, locate him, or ask me and I'll ask him, because that's what I do. Honestly, I've sent him messages like, hey, this is what I want. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I want a chatterbait rod. It's like, well, when I fish this one spot and there's grass, I want to be able to use this technique. Like you can break it down that way, and we can probably figure out something that's going to work for you and let you
Definitely.
know
Yep.
what's the best option. So the more you fish stuff, the more you learn. And honestly, if you guys want to try them out, if anybody in Vermont wants to fish with me, you're more than welcome to take my rods out and try them,
Yeah.
because
Same
I'll
with
tell
me.
you,
And I have every model. I have every model available.
it's
I can
impressive.
sell the rods out of the trailer, and I have every rod, almost every rod with a reel on it. So
Nice. So, but yeah, guys, we will end it right here. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and I will see you guys all on. It is going to be next Tuesday. I may be switching days, but Tuesday might be a cool podcast. It might not. The owner of Yak Gadget is at ICAST, but he says he might be able to come on. So we might be able to get him on to come talk about his products. But if not, it might be him talking about how you kicked my ass at Miles. So we'll see.
or lost.
But thanks, guys, for watching, and we're going to
Thanks,
end this
everyone.
right here. See you guys on Tuesday.